This is a video about problem number 13 from the online homework that's in sections 1.3 and 1.4. And in particular, I've had a couple of people ask me about using the line tool on this MyMathLab thing to get a decent picture of a line, because people's lines are sort of close but not quite right. And part of the problem is that it's with a grid this size, it's really hard to eyeball it, and so you really have to you really need to do an extra step to draw the tangent line precisely. You don't want to just rely on drawing something that looks about right. So I'm going to assume that we already have the answers here to this question, where we know that the derivative formula is 2x minus 2, and we put negative 3, negative 1, and 3 into that formula to get slopes of negative 8, negative 4, and 4. I'm going to switch to a different slide so that you can see it a little closer. And this is actually similar to a table that we created in class based on the last lecture notes in the worksheet. So here's our function. F of x is x squared minus 2x. The derivative function is 2x minus 2. And so what we can do in our table is, for a series of x coordinates, these are x coordinates, I can plug those into the f of x formula, and that gives me the y coordinates, and that's what we are used to doing. That's the version of a function and its graph that we know before we take a calculus class. And then when we have the derivative formula, we can actually include the slopes down here as well. So roughly what that means is that I can plot these points because I now have an x and a y. So here's negative 3 and 15. That's an xy pair. Negative 3, 15 would be here-ish. I could plot the point negative 1, 3. I can plot the point 0, 0. I can plot the point 1, negative 1. And finally, I can plot the point 3, 3. So that's 5 points that I can plot, and I know this is a quadratic, so it will be shaped like a parabola. But the question is, how do I add the slope information? Well, with a pencil, I can sort of do it roughly by looking at the slope. It says slope of negative 8 at the point 315, and I know that negative 8 is over 1 down 8, and so I can just sort of roughly draw kind of a steep line going down. But that won't help you when you have that more precise tool. The line tool in MyLabs Plus requires that you actually plot 2 points. And so when you pick the line tool, you can highlight one point as just being the point negative 315. The second point, you want to think about what is another point that would be on this line if it has a slope of negative 8. Remember, the slope of negative 8 means that if you go over 1, you should go down 8. So from negative 315, I go over 1 and down 8 from 15 would be to 7. So I want my line to come down between the point negative 315, which is on the curve, and the point negative 2, 7. That line will have a slope of negative 8. So you need to actually think about what that second point is before you start using the line tool. Okay, so you need to know what these 2 points are. So one point is going to be the point in the curve. The second point is going to be going over 1, and then the change of whatever the slope is. That will give you 2 points. If you hit those 2 points exactly, remember the line tool does show you the coordinates. So if you hit those 2 points exactly, then you'll have exactly the right line. So just to actually, I'll just scroll down so you can see what I drew. Down here I drew it for you. The black points are the points that are actually on the curve. Those are the ones that are coming from the formula, the f of x formula. And then for each one, the blue point would be the point that's 1 over from the black point, but having the correct slope. So you can see here, this point is going over 1 down 8 from this black point. This point, we had found that when x is negative 1, the slope should be negative 4. So from this point, I want to go over 1 down 4. So since this is at negative 1, 3, down 4 would be at 0, negative 1. So that's over 1 down 4 from there to there. So the first point I know because of the f of x formula. I also know the slope, and so I go over 1 down the slope amount, and that'll tell me the second point. And so it's these 2 points, the black one and the blue one together, that I have to use for my line tool. The reason I've colored these blue is because they're not really part of the problem. They're not part of the original graph. But to use the line tool, since you have to specify 2 points, that blue point will be the point that you want to specify. Over here, this line is supposed to have a slope of 3, so that's over 1, up 1, 2, I'm sorry, slope 4, over 1, up 1, 2, 3, 4. So if you try to hit those points exactly with the line tool, then you'll get the slope right. But if you just sort of eyeball it, then there's a lot of room for error.